Hi, and welcome to this short section on knowing your soil. And by knowing your soil, what I'm referring to is really understanding what your soil texture is, because your soil texture is going to have a direct influence on how your water infiltrates the soil and percolates through the soil. Now, by infiltration, I mean how quickly the water soaks in, how quickly it soaks into the soil surface before causing runoff. And by percolation, how that water moves through the soil both vertically and horizontally once it's entered that soil profile. Sandy soils are going to have a very fast infiltration rate. And because of this, not only is it going to soak in very quickly, but it's also going to go down in much more of a columnar fashion. Whereas a clay soil, for example, is going to have a slower infiltration rate. It's more prone to compaction. And as it infiltrates in, the percolation is going to tend to be more lateral or horizontal. So whereas you'll get a columnar effect with sandy soils, you'll get more of an oval effect with clay soils. And then loam soils, which are an ideal soil for plantings and growing things, are going to have more of, I guess you could call it a beach ball or a rounded shape to it as the soil percolates down or infiltrates and then percolates through that soil profile. So how do we determine what our soil texture is? So to determine your soil texture, I found that one of the easiest ways to do it and one of the quickest ways to do it is I will go out and I will take representative samples of the soil on the property that I am going to be working with. Now, it may be in a vegetable garden, it may be for the landscape as a whole, but I want to get a representative selection or sampling. So that means I'm going to go and probably dig out about 4, maybe 6 samples of soil from various locations around the property, as long as the soil seems to be consistent. If there's a major geological change, I'm going from, just nice soil to serpentine soils, I'm going to keep that separate because that would throw off the sampling. But I'll dig down to about 6 inches and I'll just get a trowel full and I'll take it and I'll start to fill a peanut butter jar. And I like to use jars with straight sides because it makes measuring very easy and much more accurate. So I will fill the jar, and then once this jar is full, then I will come back and I'll go into the shop and this is a sample of it, but I've got 1/8-inch screening, pretty stiff screen, and I will sift this soil through it to where it becomes nice and uniform, kind of a homogeneous whole, removing any organics, tree root or plant roots, rocks, such like that, so that I have a nice clean soil sample. Then I'll come back to this jar, and by this time it's empty. I'll kind of dust it out, clean it out, and I fill it to 3 inches in depth. And 3 inches just makes the math real easy. And once I've filled it to 3 inches, then I'll top it up with water and I'll shake it until I get all of this soil well wetted and in suspension, so it's actually floating in there. Then I can set it down for the next 24 to 48 hours, and the sand, silt, and clay will precipitate out of this. So the sand's going to drop out first. It's the largest, heaviest particle. It's followed by the silt, and then finally followed by the clay. So I'm going to have 3 distinct layers of soil in this, or texture class in this. And having that, then it makes the math very easy. If I had 1 inch of sand, 1 inch of silt, 1 inch of clay, then I'm going to have 33 1/3% of each as far as my soil texture class is compared. And I can look at a soil texture triangle and determine that. Another way to do this is to go ahead and take the same samples, get the organics and the rocks out of it, but you can send this off to a soils testing lab, and they're found online, and you can send this down and they'll give you the quantities that they require, and they'll do the soil texture analysis for you, but they'll also send back a nutrient analysis as well. So if you're looking at being able to put in the proper amounts of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, whatever the micronutrients and macronutrients may be, The lab is going to tell you, and they'll give you that value in either acreage or square foot, so or 1,000 square feet. And now you can come back to your landscape, or if you have a small farm, you can take this information and say, oh, I need to have this many pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet or per acre. And it's much more accurate than just doing a shotgun approach. So to get your texture, take representative samples, determine what you're trying to sample for, vegetables or landscape. It really doesn't make any difference as far as the procedure. Put it in a jar, a straight-sided jar such as this, and then shake it up, get it sifted, shake it up, and do your measurements that way. So anyway, we'll take a look at what a jar test looks like and look at a soil triangle in the next section. All right, so in this photograph, we're going to see where the soil has settled down. It's been about 48 hours, and you can see there are three distinctive layers in this jar. The bottom layer are the heaviest and largest particles, which are the sand particles. The middle layer is the silt, and then that top kind of chocolate milk colored layer, which is very thin, is the clay. And there will always be a certain amount of clay that will always remain in suspension. It just won't come out of that suspension and settle. But now we have three distinct layers of soil particles: sand, silt, and clay. And since we know we have 3 inches as a total, then we can simply take the value of the depth of the sand, the depth of the clay, the depth of the silt, and determine what each of their individual percentages are out of this entire sample. And then looking at the soil triangle, we're able to determine what our soil texture is. So this is a really easy and simple way to do this. Knowing what our texture is will give us a better idea of how quickly the water may be infiltrating in and what size emitters are going to be most applicable. Typically with a clay soil, you want to use a slower gallon per hour or less gallon per hour emitter application. So maybe a 0.4 or a 0.5 gallon per hour. Whereas with sandy soils, you can use a 1 or even a 2 gallon per hour emitter. So you have a choice, and it helps to determine how you're going to be doing your irrigation. So that's the benefits of understanding what your soil texture is, and that's what I mean by knowing your soil. A lot of times you're going to look at your soils and say, it's red, it's just clay, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this, but that's not always the case. I have red soils. I'm in the foothills. I did a soil texture test. I actually have closer to a sandy loam soil than a clay. So don't just take it for granted that you have clay soils or sandy soils or even loam soils. Do a soil texture test, send it out to an analysis, and get this information back, and it's going to make you better at being able to irrigate efficiently. Now in the next lecture, we're going to talk about knowing your plants, because your plants are going to have water use requirements as well. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next lesson.